Hello everybody, we're here today, you're watching Irikoze on YouTube, and we're here today to talk about David Coffin, who you see there, and Scott Davis, who you see there, and also the dishonest nature of Megan Bruton, who you saw there. This is a wholly circumstantial case that hinges on the fact that Megan manipulated the situation, and Scott may very well be innocent. So we're going to go over some of those things here today and in videos to come. Hello everybody. How you doing today? We're here today on the 4th of July. I think it's kind of fitting that we're kicking this series of Scott Davis videos off on the 4th of July because it kind of reminds us of the fact that we have freedom and we have rights in this country. And Scott pretty seriously got his rights trampled on. So, not saying that America's not great, it is, but I think it's an interesting point in time to go ahead and talk about what it means to live in the land of the free, what it's supposed to mean. So, what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to be talking about what I feel is the wrongful conviction of Scott Davis. What this comes down to here is we're going to be talking about the DA, the district attorney that prosecuted Scott. Her name is Shiela Ross. Miss Shiela Ross, well, she went after this kind of in a way that I don't know. I find her motives questionable, but we'll see here. We'll see what you think of that as I move on here. The thing is that this case is a case that is completely circumstantial. There is no hard evidence in this case that ties Scott to the crime. Okay, they had evidence that they believed belonged to the killer. They had fingerprints and blood, but neither of them matched Scott, so they were hidden. And then by the time 8 years later, and I'll get to why that's sketchy, when they go to try Scott, oh, it's all lost and gone. So that's just one fact of this case. But what I'm going to show you right now is just strictly talking about Miss Shiela Ross and her own closing argument and her own words, okay, that she uses in her own closing argument. I'm not going to be telling you right now about the defense telling you why Scott is wrongfully convicted. No, I'm not doing that. What I'm doing right now is I'm taking the lead prosecutor and I'm taking her own words and I'm going to show you how her own words prove that this conviction should not have stood. And that's how I'm going to start this video off. And the more and more I'm going to show you after this initial clip, you're going to start to see what I'm talking about. It was not pursued with good intentions. This case was not pursued because somebody felt it was the right thing to do. But I'll get to that in a minute. Anyways, let's move into the first clip where you can see exactly what it takes to have a circumstantial case actually get a verdict, to where you can actually bring it to court to potentially get a verdict on it. And she talks about the threshold that has to be met right here. But with circumstantial evidence, one of the things that you have to realize with circumstantial evidence is to warrant a conviction on circumstantial evidence, the proven facts must not only be consistent with the plea of guilty, but must exclude every reasonable theory of guilt other than the guilt of the accused. So it's right there in her own words, folks. This is taken from the transcripts of her own closing argument. Now, there's a phone call where Megan tells Scott that the victim, David, has been shot in the head. And she tells him this at 12:18 on what would be the morning of December 11th, right after midnight. Okay, so there you see. The important things there are the fact that she's saying, in order to get a conviction on a circumstantial evidence case, you must not only make all the proven facts fit the guilty plea, but you must also rule out all reasonable guilt of everybody save the accused. Okay, she is not. Miss Ross has not done this. She has not done it. And here's why. They've gone now and proven. Like I said before in other videos, they've gone and proven now. It is without a doubt Megan that passed the knowledge of David being shot to Scott. At some point in this series, you are going to end up seeing that basically Megan calls Scott at 12:18. You're going to see all the reasons why it's proven that she called him at that point in time. She told him that David Coffin had been shot at that time. It's all, well, you'll see all the proof as to why that is true. So suffice to say, this investigation went from an evidence-based investigation to a suspect-based investigation in basically just a couple hours. In just a couple of hours, Investigator Chambers, Detective Chambers, went from an evidence-based investigation to a suspect-based investigation. That is way too soon. I mean, anyways, I'll be showing you guys that in the Chambers video, of course. I'm going to show you. Some of you may know there's another high-profile case going on, an exoneration case, that is Stephen Avery with his lawyer Kathleen Zellner. Well, she has just brought in a bunch of experts to comment on the investigation and everything over in that case. And I'm going to show you what her expert investigator, guy who's spent 50 years with the FBI, has just an amazing list of credentials. Clearly, the guy is, when it comes to investigations, he is the top. And we'll see what he says. We're going to see what he has to say in the Chambers video when we talk about the investigation. Right now, we're just talking about the court. And we're talking about what happened in court, and we're talking about what is so wrong with what happened in court with Miss Ross here. So, I've already now shown you where she basically says it right there in her own words, that you have to rule out all reasonable guilt for all parties except for the accused. Okay. Now I'm going to show you her own words, again, her own words, where she effectively basically says that she doesn't know who passed the information to who. Now, I find this claim ridiculous because it is. It's absolutely ridiculous. For her to suggest that she was looking in, because she goes on and on and on about the call logs, dude. I'm not kidding. She talks about the call logs over and so much. I mean, I know she poured through those things. And trust me, she picked out calls. She mentions calls in her closing argument that are right around 12:20. Okay? The reason why that's important is because it's at 12:18 the call from Megan to Scott happens. She picked out other calls from that time frame. It's impossible for me to believe that she did not look and see that call. She had to be she was looking at Scott's records. She would have seen that he had an incoming call from Megan. She would have looked at Megan's records and seen that she had an outgoing call to Scott. The other fact of the matter is that you cannot, there's no way you're going to get me to believe that she did not ever see, somehow she just was never, nobody ever stuck the document in front of her where David's best friend, somebody who has no attachment to want to help or lie for Scott in any way, shape, or form, has no connection to Scott, says he heard Megan say that to Scott on the phone, that he heard Megan saying that at the time, at 12:18 or whatever. Now, it's impossible for me to believe that Shiela Ross never ever saw this statement. So she knew. Okay? So here's what she was really doing. In this next document that you're going to see, is all she was doing was trying to create a cloud of confusion. She was trying to basically just push it into the realm of ridiculousness by talking about it ridiculously, comparing it to Abbott and Costello, who's on first even. Yeah. This is how she creates this kind of cloud of obfuscation around this call. This 12:18 call where Megan passed the guilty knowledge to Scott. And because Chambers immediately starts interviewing Scott because he thinks Scott has something to do with it, and Scott just basically tells him in the interview, look, man, I didn't shoot him. Well, suddenly Chambers goes, okay, that's it, you're the guy. Chambers goes outside. I mean, he goes right out there and talks to David's friend, the one that heard Megan, and I have the documents. This guy told Chambers. He told him Yes, I heard her say that. Chambers still walks back into that interrogation room and acts like Scott was the possessor of the guilty knowledge. When you have this kind of willful ignorance in a case, you can't put any stock in it. You can't put any stock in it at all. I mean, the investigation is a farce. But so we'll move on to the document right now, where you'll see how she basically just tries to create a cloud of confusion around the 12:18 call from Megan to Scott, where she passes in the guilty knowledge. Here we go. The defense will have you believe it was Megan who told him that David had been shot, and that's how he knew. Well, the good question is this. We know this, and you could go round and round for many hours of playing like a game of who's on first on this, who told who what. The bottom line is either Megan knew or the defendant knew, and they both knew that night, and one of them contaminated the other. The information originated with either Megan or the defendant. We know that for sure. Yeah, there it is, folks. I mean, look at it. She's right there telling you that she doesn't know. She doesn't know. They both had the knowledge, but she doesn't know who contaminated who. Well, Miss Ross, according to your statement that a circumstantial case requires you to rule out all guilt except for that of the accused, it sounds like you've just admitted that you didn't do so. So, that's my point here. It's now been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that Megan did pass Scott that information at this point. So this case has become ridiculous in the extreme. All right, so brings me back to the question. How can you take anything seriously in this case when you know the investigation was a farce, and you're beginning to realize that by her own admission, by Mrs. Ross, by her own words, that the legal case was a farce. Should have never been there. She's admitting it. She's saying she doesn't know. She's saying she can't rule Megan out. It's a lie. She's only saying that because she doesn't want to say that she knows that Megan passed the guilty knowledge, because she knows she'll lose the jury. She will lose the jury. You know how long the jury took 4 days? Yeah. They stayed out for 4 days. This was not clear cut. They did not rush to a decision in this. This thing, they considered it a long time. Okay? Trust me, if Miss Ross had said that, yes, it was Megan that passed that knowledge to Scott, not guilty plea would have come through. I guarantee it. Guarantee it. Because these jurors didn't just decide on this quickly. They had some qualms. So, okay, guys. So I'm going to go ahead and break this into two parts. This is going to be the end of part one, because I want to keep them right around 10 to 12 minutes. So there's going to be, the Miss Ross video part one, which is what you just watched, and then you can also move on right away to the Miss Ross video part two. But here's where we're going to create a break. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe, and we'll see you.